The shriek of the ship's hull groaned as it pierced the thick atmosphere of Coriath Prime. Captain Alex Carter gripped the controls, his knuckles pale against the worn leather. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold air circulating through the cockpit. The alien world outside was a vast, rocky expanse, shadowed by mountains that loomed like jagged teeth. Their ship, the Odyssey, a heavily modified freighter, bucked and swerved as it descended into the turbulent air, the distant glow of the planet's twin suns casting an eerie orange light across the desolate landscape. "Steady, Captain!" Lieutenant Sarah Klein's voice came through the comms, calm and composed, as always. But Alex could hear the subtle edge of anxiety in her tone. "We've got 5 minutes before we hit ground. You sure this is the place?" Alex didn't answer immediately. His mind was elsewhere, his thoughts consumed by the mission, by the fear gnawing at the pit of his stomach. It wasn't just the planet that unsettled him, it was the silence. For days, the Zarin, their supposed enemy, had gone quiet. No attacks, no communications. Just a vast, unnatural silence. And silence, to Alex, was the most dangerous thing in the universe. "They're here, Sarah. I can feel it," he finally said, his voice low, almost a whisper. The Zarin never left a battlefield without a trace. Yet here they were, after weeks of tracking, landing on a planet once teeming with hostile forces, now eerily empty. The ship rocked harder, and Sarah's voice crackled again. "Brace for impact!" The ground beneath them rumbled violently as the Odyssey slammed down, the landing gear screeching under the strain. Dust filled the cockpit, choking the already stale air. Outside, the rocky surface of Coriath Prime spread endlessly, broken only by craggy outcroppings and the occasional, twisted metal ruin. Alex exhaled, gripping the armrests, feeling the tremors subside as the ship's engines powered down. The silence returned, but now it was suffocating. "Welcome to the graveyard," Sarah muttered under her breath, stepping into the airlock with a hiss. Alex adjusted his uniform, looking to the team assembled by the ship's entrance. His tactical team, 4 specialists, all hand-picked for their skills, were already preparing weapons and scanning the area. But it wasn't just their expertise that Alex valued, it was their loyalty. These were people he trusted with his life. "Status report, Mitchell?" Alex asked, turning to the communications officer. Mitchell, a young man with short-cropped hair and a constant look of determination, glanced up from his console. "The Zarin's last known transmission came from this sector, Captain. They've been quiet for nearly 3 days now. No sign of movement, no radio traffic. It's like they vanished off the face of the planet." Sarah stepped up beside Alex, her brow furrowed. "This doesn't feel right. A species like the Zarin, they don't just disappear. They're planning something, Captain. And I don't think it's something we'll want to walk into." Alex's jaw tightened. He nodded but didn't respond. His mind was already running through the possibilities. The Zarin didn't retreat. They didn't get scared. They didn't back down. Whatever was happening on this planet, it was something they feared. He took a deep breath, his mind shifting back to the present moment. "All right. We move out in 2 minutes. Mitchell, keep the comms open. Sarah, you're with me." A tense silence hung over the team as they geared up and prepared for the mission. Alex took one last look at the planet outside the window, Coriath Prime, a dead world. But something about it felt too quiet. Too perfect. He wasn't sure what they'd find, but whatever it was, Alex knew they had to find it first. The hatch opened, and the team stepped out into the alien wilderness. The air was thin, the smell of rust and ozone hanging heavy. Alex's boots crunched against the dry, cracked surface as he led the team forward. His hand gripped the blaster at his side, every sense alert, straining for any sound, any sign of danger. "This way," Alex ordered, pointing toward the twisted remains of a nearby structure. It looked like a crash site, the wreckage scattered across the ground like the bones of a giant. They moved cautiously, the tension between them palpable. As they neared the wreckage, a soft hum filled the air, faint but unmistakable. Alex froze, signaling for everyone to stop. Sarah shot him a questioning glance. Do you hear that? Alex whispered. Before Sarah could respond, the humming stopped. A sudden chill swept through the air, making the hairs on the back of Alex's neck stand on end. Captain! Sarah's voice was tight. We're not alone. The words hit like a slap, the gravity of the situation settling in. The hunt for the Tsarin had just begun, and already, Alex was questioning if they would survive the truth of what lay ahead. The hum in the air was faint, but it cut through the oppressive silence of Coriath Prime like a whisper in the dark. Alex stood still, his senses straining as he tried to pinpoint the source. The sudden cessation of sound had thrown the team into alert mode, their rifles at the ready. Sarah's eyes met his, a silent question between them. What was this? It's gone, Alex muttered, though the unease clung to his voice. The hum, if it had ever existed, had stopped just as abruptly as it had started. But that didn't reassure him. There was something unnatural about this planet, something lurking beneath the surface. Should we check the wreckage? Sarah asked, her voice calm, but the way her fingers hovered over her sidearm betrayed her tension. Alex didn't answer immediately. His mind was already whirring with possibilities. The Tsarin were notorious for their cunning, never leaving behind a trace unless it was part of a trap. But why set a trap on a planet so barren, so silent? The longer they stayed, the more Alex felt the weight of the atmosphere pressing in on him. The answer was hidden somewhere in that wreckage. Yeah, he finally said, his voice sharp. But we move quickly. Stay sharp, everyone. The team split into two groups, moving in tandem. Alex and Sarah approached the wreckage first, the dry ground crunching beneath their boots. The remains of the structure were massive, twisted metal and scorched stone half buried under the sand. It looked like something, some kind of ship, had collided with the planet's surface at high speed, but there were no scorch marks, no signs of fire. The wreckage looked too clean, too deliberate. Over here, Sarah called, her voice tight. She had found something. Alex moved to her side, heart hammering in his chest. A hollow cylinder, a piece of twisted metal, gleamed under the shadow of the wreckage. It looked like a data capsule, its surface scratched but intact. Alex knelt, carefully brushing away the dust. The symbols etched into its surface were unfamiliar, alien in nature. But there was no mistaking the presence of a Tsarin signature. God, Alex whispered. This isn't a crash site. This is a message. Message? Sarah raised an eyebrow. From who? The question hung in the air, unanswered. There was no sign of life, no sign of Tsarin anywhere nearby. But Alex felt it, an overwhelming sense of being watched, like the very ground beneath him was alive. Get the team to spread out, Alex ordered, his voice a notch harsher than usual. I don't want any surprises. As Sarah moved to relay the order, Alex carefully examined the data capsule. His fingers brushed across the symbols, feeling their sharpness, and his mind raced. The Tsarin had never been known for their subtlety, but they were masters of psychological warfare. The presence of the capsule, left so deliberately in the wreckage, was too precise to be a coincidence. What do you think it says? Sarah asked, returning to his side. Not sure yet, Alex replied. But I know one thing, whatever this is, it's important. Sarah didn't respond immediately, but the tension between them was palpable. They both knew that their time was running out. The Tsarin weren't the kind of enemies to leave their enemies alive for long, and the longer they lingered on this forsaken planet, the more likely it was that the Tsarin would return in force. Captain, came Mitchell's voice over the comms, breaking through the silence. We've found something. You might want to take a look. Alex's stomach dropped. Another surprise. He didn't like surprises. On my way, he replied curtly, already moving toward the sound of Mitchell's voice. The air seemed to thicken with each step he took, and his unease grew with every crunch of the dry ground beneath his boots. The once quiet planet now felt as if it were holding its breath. When he reached Mitchell, the young communications officer was standing over a pile of rubble, his face pale. He stepped aside to reveal a small, cylindrical object, much like the one Alex had found, But this one was cracked open, and inside, there was something far more unsettling. "It's a beacon," Mitchell said, his voice trembling. The beacon flickered to life as Alex knelt beside it, his heart pounding. A low, guttural hum began to resonate from the device, and a flickering holographic image emerged from the cracked surface. It was a Zarin, but not just any Zarin. This one was different, its eyes glowing with a fierce, unnatural light. The figure raised its hand, and in a distorted voice it spoke. "Humans," the hologram rasped, the word almost dripping with malice. "You should not have come here. Your fate has already been sealed." Alex's breath caught in his throat, and for the first time since landing on Coriath Prime, he felt a sense of dread that he couldn't shake. The Zarin had been preparing for them, and they had been waiting. The image of the Zarin flickered, its glowing eyes searing through the dim light of the desert planet. "Your fate has already been sealed," it rasped, its voice low and chilling. The hologram's sinister words echoed in Alex's mind, twisting his thoughts into a knot. He stared at the projection, trying to make sense of it. Sarah was the first to speak, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "Captain, what does this mean? Are they going to attack us?" Alex didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing. The Zarin had always been a step ahead of them, using fear as a weapon, and the fact they had left this message meant they were already preparing for something catastrophic. But why now? Why here on this barren world? He turned to the team, meeting each of their eyes. "We don't know yet," he said, his voice firm. "But we need to be ready for whatever comes next. They're playing us. This is no random message." "Then why leave it for us to find?" Sarah asked, brow furrowed. She paced a few steps, eyes scanning the horizon as though searching for an answer in the endless expanse of sand. "That's what we need to figure out," Alex replied, frustration tightening his chest. "But we don't have the luxury of time. This planet isn't as empty as it seems. We're being watched." The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he spoke the words. They weren't alone. Alex could feel it in the air, an invisible pressure, a weight that had only grown heavier since they arrived. Mitchell's voice cut through the tension, breaking Alex's reverie. "Captain, the wreckage, it's not just metal and sand. There's a network of tunnels beneath it, but they're sealed tight. It looks like it's been here for centuries." "Centuries?" Alex's heart skipped a beat. "That doesn't make sense. The Zarin have only been around for a fraction of that time. This site wasn't here when we first mapped this system. How could it have been hidden for so long?" "We're dealing with something bigger than we thought," Sarah said, her tone grim. "And I think we've just scratched the surface." Alex's thoughts raced as he processed the new information. The Zarin were a highly intelligent and cunning species, but this was beyond their usual manipulations. This planet, this wreckage, the tunnels, it was all part of something much older, something the Zarin had uncovered or perhaps even been drawn to. The question was, why? "Prepare for an entry into the tunnels," Alex ordered, his voice cutting through the air with certainty. "We need answers. Now." His team moved quickly, packing up their gear and making their way to the coordinates Mitchell had found. The tunnel entrance was hidden beneath a pile of debris, almost as if someone had deliberately covered it, leaving only a small crack for those with the right equipment to find it. Alex knelt at the entrance, pulling out a compact scanner. The tunnel was indeed old, its structure compromised by time, but it was still intact. The readings on the scanner suggested there was someone, still alive down there. "We need to go in," Alex said, a sense of urgency in his voice. "But stay close. We're not alone down there." The group descended into the darkness, their flashlights casting long shadows along the narrow walls. The temperature dropped with each step they took, the air thick with the scent of decay. As they ventured deeper into the tunnel, Alex's sense of dread grew. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the sound of their footsteps echoed unnervingly loud in the stillness. After what felt like hours of navigating the winding corridors, they came to a large chamber. The walls were covered in strange symbols, their meaning unclear but somehow familiar. The floor was scattered with discarded equipment and debris, pieces of machinery, Old weapons, broken panels, and… Wait! Sarah's voice rang out in the silence, halting everyone in their tracks. Alex's flashlight flicked to her, and he saw the pale look on her face. She was kneeling, her hand hovering over a strange object half buried in the rubble. A relic, ancient and worn. "What is it?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah picked it up carefully, dusting it off. It was a pendant, etched with more of the same symbols. But this wasn't like anything they had seen so far. It seemed familiar, almost as though it was designed to match something within them. "It's from Earth," Sarah said slowly, her voice filled with disbelief. "What?" Alex couldn't hide the confusion in his tone. Earth had been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for centuries, its secrets hidden behind layers of myth. The idea that something from their home planet could be here, in the heart of an alien world, made no sense. "I don't know how or why, but this symbol, it's part of something I've seen before," Sarah murmured. "This isn't just about the Zarin anymore, Alex. This is bigger." A sudden, chilling noise reverberated through the chamber. The sound of metal scraping against stone. And then, a voice, soft, but unmistakable, came from the darkness. "You're too late." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't alone. Alex's pulse quickened as the voice echoed through the chamber. He turned sharply, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. The air felt heavier now, like it was pressing against him, thick with the weight of an unseen presence. He reached for his weapon, fingers grazing the cool metal of his sidearm. "Who's there?" His voice was steady, but inside, his nerves were screaming. A low, raspy laugh answered him, sending a shiver down his spine. "You came too late. The seeds have already been planted. Show yourself!" Alex shouted, frustration rising in his chest. They were already at a disadvantage, deep within the tunnels, with no clear idea of who or what they were up against. The walls seemed to pulse with a low hum, as if the entire chamber was alive, responding to the mysterious voice. The team tightened around him, forming a protective circle, their weapons drawn, their gazes scanning every crevice of the room. "It's not here," Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It's in our minds. Whatever this is, it's manipulating us, pulling at our fears." Alex nodded, but his eyes never left the shadows. "Keep your focus. We're not leaving without answers." The pendant in Sarah's hand felt heavier now, as if its weight had increased tenfold. Alex's eyes flicked to it, feeling a sudden connection to the object, as if it were calling out to him. But that couldn't be possible. The pendant was ancient, lost for centuries. There was no way it should have this kind of power, not without reason. "It's not just a relic," Sarah said softly, glancing at him. "It's a key. A link to something far greater. Whatever it is we're dealing with, it's old. And it's watching us." Before Alex could respond, a loud crash echoed from behind them. The ground beneath their feet trembled. "Move!" Alex barked, springing into action. They bolted, sprinting toward the source of the noise, their footsteps pounding through the narrow corridor. Behind them, the oppressive atmosphere of the chamber seemed to follow, chasing them with a force that made every breath feel labored. They rounded a corner, their flashlights casting long, erratic beams of light against the walls. The tunnel ahead split into two, the path diverging into an unknown labyrinth. Alex hesitated for a moment, his instincts screaming at him to turn back, but he pushed the thought aside. There was no going back now. They had come too far, and the Zarin's threat loomed larger than ever. "Sarah, you and Mitchell go left," Alex ordered. "I'll take the right with Reeve. We'll cover more ground." With a sharp nod, Sarah and Mitchell disappeared into the left passage, their figures quickly swallowed by the darkness. Alex watched them go, heart pounding in his chest. The eerie silence of the tunnels felt like a trap, a slow suffocation of their hope. Every step he took felt like it might be their last. "Do you feel it?" Reeve asked quietly, his voice almost drowned by the heavy thrum of the air. "The walls, they're alive. It's like they're breathing." Alex nodded, his throat dry. It wasn't just the walls, everything felt wrong. The very air had shifted since they entered. "Stay close," he said, his voice tight. "We're not alone down here." As they moved deeper into the right passage, a soft glow appeared in the distance, barely perceptible at first, like the faintest flicker of light. They pushed forward, their footsteps echoing off the walls. The closer they got, the brighter the glow became. Suddenly, the passage opened up into another chamber, larger, much larger than the one they had just left. At its center was a massive crystalline structure, pulsating with an eerie, otherworldly light. It was beautiful in a way that made Alex's skin crawl. The pendant in Sarah's hand seemed to resonate with the crystal, almost as if the two were connected. "Holy hell!" Reeve breathed, taking a step back. "What is that?" "I don't know," Alex said, his mind racing. The crystal had the same strange symbols etched into its surface as the pendant. But it was more than just a relic. It was a beacon, an artifact far beyond anything they'd encountered before. "It's been here longer than we realized," Sarah said from behind him, her voice tinged with awe. This was the Zaren's prize. The reason they're here." Alex felt his blood run cold. "Then it's not just a relic. It's a weapon." Before he could process what that meant, the ground shook again. The crystal flared brighter, casting a blinding light that left them momentarily blinded. Alex instinctively shielded his eyes, but it didn't matter. The vision was seared into his mind, too intense to forget. When the light dimmed, they found themselves surrounded. Dark, twisted shapes emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. Alien figures, indistinct yet familiar. It was the Zaren, many of them, and more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. "They've been waiting for us," Sarah whispered. Alex felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. The tension in the air was palpable, their every breath heavy with the knowledge that this was no longer just a mission. It was a war, and humanity's survival hung in the balance. The Zaren advanced. And they were not alone.